Well, welcome to Straight Talk. This is Kentucky Senator Gerald Neal, and I have very, very special guests today. I have not only individuals that I work with in the General Assembly, but I have the leadership of the Democrats in the Senate right here before you today. I have Caucus Leader Reginald Thomas, and I have Whip David Yates, and of course, I'm Gerald Neal, and I serve as floor leader. And we're going to give you the activities of the first week of the session. But before we get to that, what I'd like to do is give you just a little idea of how this works. We have just finished the first week of what we call the organization session. Now, let me back up a little bit. Every even year, we do what we call the long session. That's a 60-day process. When you count 60 days, you don't include like Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. So you can see where that extends it out into mid-April or something like that. Well, now we're in the short session, and the short session is 30 days. Same thing, except the first 4 days of that session, we organize. We establish leadership, we do some other things, and we file some bills. But then we recess. In this case, we recess till February the 7th. Then we continue the session where we get down to really legislating, et cetera, and other matters related there too. And then we go to, I guess, let's see, February, March. Since we've pushed it out a little bit, we may end up in the first part of April. It just depends on how that's going to unfold. So it's a little different. And this is not the intense time normally. That's usually the long session, but it can get intense. But what's exciting this year is that there's a new team and configuration of team of leadership that I think we're all excited about because, we've been knowing each other, Caucus Leader Thomas and Whip Yates, we've been knowing each other for a pretty good while, and yet we're in a different relationship. So we got to learn each other a different way. And it's been fun doing it. It's been a pleasure doing it. So I want to welcome our guest, Caucus Leader Thomas.
I'll call you Gerald if you don't mind.
You can call me Gerald. In fact, I like that informality. Go for it.
Okay. Yes, welcome. I'm glad to be back on Straight Talk and looking forward to those several good we're going to have while the sessions are occurring.
And we also have with us, as I've indicated, Whip David Yates. David, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me on, and for anybody watching, I'm honored to be here and serving leadership with you guys. Got a heck of a team, and that's kind of what we talked about, that whole new strategy of a team approach. And so a lot of motivation from each of the members. So while the three of us are here on screen today, we know that it's the entire caucus working together for some common goals. And I think we're gonna get some stuff done. So happy to be here, and I'm happy to answer some questions to anybody that may clue in.
Well, let me just say this. I personally am excited, and I'm gonna tell you why I'm excited. I'm excited because over 4 days, I've seen us transition from guys going in several different directions, friends, of course, but going in several different directions, coming together as a team. And I think that portends well for us all. But let's be real. We're in a situation where we serve in the minority party, so to speak. In other words, the majority party is the Republican Party in this instance, and they set the agenda primarily. They're the majority. But yet we are such a relevant factor because each of us represents 115,000 plus people. Our voice is just as strong as anyone else. It's represented by a vote and by what we say vocally and what we do behind the scenes to get to where we think things should go. So it's a very significant thing that we do. But Reggie, I just want to know, because I don't think I've asked you this yet, because we've been organizing. What do you see as the most significant thing in terms of issues that our listening audience should be focused on?
Well,
now you're out of Lexington.
Yeah, I'm out of Lexington.
Out of Louisville. But we have the interests of the entire Commonwealth at heart. Go ahead.
Well, Gerald, I think there's a divergence here I think the Republican majority has one item of interest that they're focused on this session. I think the people of Kentucky and the Democrats have a different area of interest. What you see the Republicans push for this session, both in the House and the Senate, is to cut the income tax rate down from 5% to 4%. Now, that may sound attractive until you realize that we all don't earn the same amount of money. In fact, here in Kentucky, the average income for Kentuckians is only around $48,000 a year. So when you're talking about cutting your income tax rate by 1%, you're talking about giving most Kentuckians about $480 additional a year, about $40 a month. Okay. However, there is that 1% of Kentuckians, or really less than 1%, about 1% that make over $250,000, $300,000 a year. And when you talk about cutting their taxes by 1%, then you're talking about giving them a significant amount of money, $3,000 or even more, which amounts to like $250 a month.
Well, stick a pin in that, and I'm gonna come back to you because I want to get David to tell me what he thinks is the most important issue this session.
Well, I think part of it is going to have to be really communicating with the people out there on all the issues. What we saw this past is it's hard to sum all this up in a few minutes. Like Reggie, you're talking about the income, the tax reduction, that was positive. It sounds great, but you really have to explain how it's going to work, and then how it's offset by additional taxes, and really how that shakes out, and how it projects to other programs and things like schools and childcare programs and things. To me, we've got to generate revenue. We're a poor state. We either do what we can by taxing people, we cut them, we move it, but some way you've got to generate that revenue to be able to keep going. And so instead of the tax word, I look at other ways. One way that we've been successful is tourism. We've really pushed into it. So we double down on the tourism, we bring it in. And not only does that help bring some money to the pocket, but it also increases the quality of life, brings in young professionals. Marijuana is a major issue. People have discussed it. We are slow to act on it. It's a moneymaker. It is a socially positive thing. We know the majority of Kentuckians have said yes to medical marijuana. I think that there's also that with the recreational, and there's so much money to be made. Sports gaming is additional money, but also that quality of life. And there's that balancing act. But Gerald and Reggie, I think the big part is making sure that people understand that we're fighting for our constituents. We're fighting for the people. So even though we are not part of the supermajority, we're part of the consensus of what is being asked for by the large majority of Kentuckians. And I think that we have to make that very clear.
Okay, well, you both have made it easy for me because I agree with both of you. I think you hit it right on the button. We haven't had this discussion like this, and it's interesting that we're still on the same page with respect. I want to go back to Reggie though. Reggie was getting into this piece regarding the tax reduction. Reggie, go ahead and give us a little more in depth on that.
Well, the tax cut is regressive, Gerald, and
what do you mean it's regressive? What do you mean?
Thank you for saying. What I mean is that it benefits the wealthy to the detriment and to the harm. Okay, in other words, again, the wealthy people, your 1%ers in Kentucky are going to benefit significantly and end up paying less money to the state by this cut in the income tax rate. But David is absolutely correct. Costs are going to keep going up. Service fees we're going to charge more in service fees, more utility taxes. And so those in the middle income and below are going to end up paying more taxes, paying a greater share of their earnings in cost fees and taxes to Kentucky, while those who are wealthiest and well off are going to pay less. That's not fair. So that's what I mean by regressive. It benefits the wealthy to the detriment and the harm of the poor.
So David, your perspective on that?
Well, I agree. And I think it's not one that you agree or don't disagree. That's not a political issue. That's just basic economics. You do the math. It tells you where the money goes. But we know the Commonwealth of Kentucky is a poor state. We've actually had some good budget years, and a lot of that has to do with some decisions that were made, but a lot by the federal government, and the money that was put into back into the economy, and calls it circulation, and how that was done. What I worry about is the future of Kentucky. We're short-sighted. Politicians a lot of times operate in our 4-year election cycles, but that's hurt Kentucky over and over again. So this investment in our children, the lack of investment in our children, we're seeing those major effects. We're seeing it through crime. We're seeing it through falling behind in reading readiness and school readiness. And so to me, I think that it makes, just like a business, it makes economic sense, but also social sense to make sure we're invested into that future. So I'm not against cutting taxes. Hell, I think it's a great buzzword. It sounds good. I'm all for it. But we have to make sure that we're not doing it, cutting for one part and filling that hole in the backs of the others. I think that we can do it in a way by raising revenue. We raise revenue, and I talked about it, whether it's increasing tourism, with marijuana, with the sports gaming, but we've got to make sure we're increasing revenue in ways other than just taxing the middle class and the working people, because to me, whether it's not fair, you're right, but other than that, if you remove the discretionary income from those who don't have a whole lot, it stifles our local economy. And so we keep talking about, hey, this is good for businesses, this is good for that. We also know that the saying is, I think it was John Yarmouth's brother, who was a very conservative Republican who owned barbecue shops, and he kept talking about, how that you wanted to be able to cut the taxes and you want to make sure that you had policies in place so that the corporation had more money. But then he said, you know what, we got to be careful, because if you tax the poor too much, they can't have any money to buy barbecue, which stifles my business.
How true.
And I think that we're running into that predicament. So let's cut the politics out of it. You bring your economic experts, and they'll tell you who's going to be paying this taxes, where it's going to fall. And I think it's not fair to the majority of Kentuckians, and it's not good for the future of Kentucky.
Well, all I can say is cutting the politics out of it is aspirational, because I don't know how you would do
That's
that.
right. That's right.
But it was very interesting, because this past week the governor gave the State of the State address, and it was interesting in two respects. I want to lay it out just a little bit, but the governor really framed where we are. I think he did it very well. Think about it. Difficult times, including a pandemic, tornadoes. We're talking about in Kentucky now, flooding, ice storms, etc. And that's just some of the stuff that's going on. And despite all of that, think about it. We've had the best 2-year period of economic growth, and perhaps even development, than we've seen in history of Kentucky. Now think about that. The largest economic growth in the history of the Commonwealth. Kentucky has announced the creation of 42,600 full-time jobs all across Kentucky. We've cemented Kentucky's status as the electric vehicle battery production capital in history. Now think about this. We poised for its 4th highest year of state budget surpluses. I mean, this is like unprecedented where we are. And I think the point he was making was that we're poised, we have a platform now and a trajectory that if we take advantage of it properly, David, as you was alluding to a little earlier, then we can make the proper investments and go right off into the future. Now that's one side of it. Then the other side of it, I had to chuckle because some of our colleagues across the aisle saying, well, he didn't do that, we did that. See, they're missing the whole point. We did that. You have the executive branch, you have the legislative branch, we play our roles. We are all engaged in that. And that gets back to what you're talking about, David, that partisan piece. I think Reggie alluded to it as well. But let's move on to something else real quick. Medical marijuana, is that not a no-brainer? Why is that not a no-brainer? Why is there resistance? And the resistance is in the Senate. It's not in the House. It's in the Senate. So explain this to me, my colleagues, and so our listening audience will understand this more better.
Well, if we could explain it, the truth is you can't. You want to beat your head against the wall. So we know that the majority, first of all, the science is there. It makes sense. We know that the big pharmaceutical companies are against it because it hits them in the pocketbooks, and we know that they have big PACs and big lobbying group. And unfortunately, some people don't have the intestinal fortitude to be able to stand up against them. We know that's an issue. Yeah. We know that is. But we know that when we go to the national legislative conferences, we talk about what works where. They look at us and go, look, you are logistically poised to be a major hub. Kentucky, there is so much money that you are missing that we're causing. And to hear other states tell us, does that not make you sick to your stomach to think that we have over and over, to hear leaders from all across this country, Democrat and Republican, look at us like we've lost our minds, that we're simply putting it away.
See, you can't just explain it. Reggie's got the answer. I know he's got the answer.
Give it to me, Reggie. Tell me.
Reggie's going to explain that to us and our listening audience, and we're going to get it. Go ahead, Reggie.
Well, David was doing a good job, but I would just add two things. One positive. I mean, they're both positive, but in different directions. One, in terms of dealing with the drug addiction, the opioid addiction that we have in this state that has really strangled us for the last decade, medical marijuana would reduce that. We would see a significant decline in our opioid addiction if we had medical marijuana. Secondly, we're blessed with such rich limestone in our soil across the country. It grows, very readily and very prominently in this state. I mean, rich leaves. And so, we would be a mecca for buyers, for manufacturers of marijuana in this state, producing thousands of jobs and millions of dollars of income for us. So those are two reasons. Like David said, it's just a no-brainer. David's right. Why we should not, we should authorize it.
Reggie, I just tossed the question to you to explain us why the resistance, and you just made it even harder for us to understand, because what you're saying is exactly correct. And look, I understand a little bit. Now, folks, you need to understand, we're not talking about recreational marijuana here. This discussion right at this point is on medical marijuana. It's scientific based for people who get relief from no other way that they can get relief. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I think that was the terminology used, but I understand it's a little more rockier when you start talking about recreational marijuana. But I do want to point this out here. Colorado brought in a record $423 million in tax revenue for marijuana in 2021. That included recreational. And they collected $387 million in taxes from the sales. Colorado. More than $12 billion in marijuana has been sold since legalization in 2014. $12 billion. With the states collecting over Colorado over $2 billion in taxes. Recreational sales of marijuana could be taxed and bring us a whole new source of revenue and tourism. The generated revenue could be used to fund programs such as what? Early childhood education, which we can't quite get there. Full day kindergarten across the board, where we can't fully get there. So let's broaden the discussion. Why are we so resistant? I know. Why are we so resistant in Kentucky when 37 states out of 50 are already knee deep in this in one way or another? Canada is already left out there, totally out there, and in a comfort zone and doing what they're doing. But in Kentucky, we can't seem to get it. We're a little late.
Mr. Leader, it's because that is a progressive way of thinking. And lately that has become a dirty word to progress. But here's the truth. We know it. Prohibition doesn't work. This country has tested it time and time again. Marijuana is in Kentucky. It's our #1 cash crop, but we bury our heads in the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist. We don't tax it. We don't regulate it. We allow it to run rampant with crime and other issues. In fact, we know that we were brought in on a task force that they think that's a major funding source for cartels, marijuana, because we put it into the black market, the traditional market, we make it so in a way that they can make money. So that's part of it. It's just, I think it is a lack of education and understanding of how it works. But the positives of this, if we ignore it, if we put our heads in the sand, it's still there. If we legalize and regulate it, then it's safer, but it also is a funding source. Maybe we look in the Let's Grow marijuana legislation that we have been filed by Rachel Roberts and myself and Morgan McGarvey, and I know that a lot of my co-sponsors, we're going to handle with recovery task force, recovery as far as making sure that people have everything they need for wraparound services for other addiction areas, because we failed them. My mother had, it was her birthday yesterday.
Happy birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday.
That's what it's her heavenly birthday, because she struggled with lupus and cancer. They would give her every type of medicine there was. They almost like a zombie. But she didn't want to take gummies or any type of marijuana because it was illegal. So bad off that she went to Florida for a recovery center so that she could kind of wean herself off so she could spend the last years being present with her grandbabies. Now, I know that the only reason they would give her the kind of that she's full of those drugs, but she can't have the medical marijuana that she otherwise would have been able to function, is because of politicians getting in the way and the pharmaceutical lobbyists. It's wrong. And it's time that people, like I say, have the intestinal fortitude to do what they know is right. So we have all these reasons, but one of the main reasons is the people, those that are suffering, that we know that we put in these addictive narcotics one after another. There's a better alternative, a cheaper alternative, and we need to make it available to all Kentuckians.
Well, let me switch gears a little bit, because I'm still baffled. A lot of things baffle me. I'm still baffled, but I know this is a little more trickier issue with respect to this, Reggie. Sports betting. What's your position on sports betting? What are the benefits, and what do you think are the things that militate against Kentucky, at least to this point, going forward in that area? I mean, we got horse races running all over the place. We're betting all over the place. We got betting parlors everywhere, and the house is not falling down. We got states around us that are, everybody in Kentucky is going to these states around us. I mean, Reggie.
Gerald, you're right. And the reality is, we've had sports gaming in Kentucky for over 200 years. Okay, we've been betting on sports in Kentucky legally for over 200 years. So with 2 centuries of history behind us, and embedded in our culture, to say that we can't extend that to football games or basketball games or other sports just makes no sense. And again, it's a revenue driver. And David keeps emphasizing that, and he needs to continue to emphasize that. It brings in money to the state, and lots of it to do good things, to invest in our people, to invest in our schools, to invest in our children, to provide more healthcare access to those who need, to provide more mental health treatment to those who suffer from depression and anxiety. That money can do a lot of good things. So look, I can't explain why we don't have sports gaming, because again, we were one of the first states in the country to have sports gaming in this nation.
Well, David, of course, now you did raise the question of when we were talking about marijuana, of addiction from one angle. There are those that raise the issue with sports betting, and even though we have gaming in other forms, or as Reggie says, we do sports betting notwithstanding, there is an argument that some people can get addicted to that type of behavior. What's your perspective on that?
No, I think that's very true and honest. And I think when we deal with these issues, we need to be true and honest with this. Whether even marijuana, I think, will have some level of addiction. my wife jokes around me, I'm addicted to coffee. It's a thing. You can tell I'm wired and talk fast this morning. I had a few cups. But I come from a line of individuals. My father helped start the Easy Does It Club for Narcotics Anonymous. I understand addiction and the big book and believe in recovery, the miracle of it. And so there has to be things in place. What we're trying to pretend that the betting doesn't already happen, the sports betting. We try to pretend that every state around us doesn't have it. Same thing with the marijuana. What we do is we need to be very real and look at it and say, look at the environment which we have. If I pull up my phone right now, I can make a bet. I guess technically it's illegal because you have to put in a different zip code of where you live and what state you're on to it. And heck, I don't know where the funding source will be. Tomorrow, I'm up at the Bengals game and I'll be in Ohio and I may make a bet there. I know a lot of people cross the bridge and they have what are called the rounds where they can ping off of it so they can make bets. It's here. What we're doing is we're making sure that Kentucky does not have that revenue. When we're at the U of L games, you'll see up Caesars will have the 50-50 thing where they're making the different money onto it. It is all around us. Now we have the gray machines that you see in almost every single gas station, whatnot. It is here. What I'm saying is let's be responsible. Let's put it in place where we're regulating it, where there's oversight, and where some of the money that's generated from it helps with the addiction services. It helps with recovery services, that with each and every one of it, because ignoring it, saying it's illegal as of a prohibition, and we know that doesn't work. It's a level of ignorance that some of us can go home that don't believe it and can tell your constituents, you know what, some of the senators can say, you know what, I voted against it because I don't believe in it. But what did you do to fix the problem? Yeah. And so I think we got to be problem solvers. We got to be leaders. And so whether you like it or not, you have to resonate. Marijuana is in Kentucky. It is our biggest one cash crop. People are betting. It is all the way around us. Let's step up. Let's regulate. Let's do it in a way that helps raise some money. And you know what the positive thing about being last is, not only do we, besides losing all that revenue, we get to learn from the mistakes of all the other states. We're so far behind that we get to go back and get best practices. This could be a huge win for us. But to me,
you're really reaching deep on that argument. I say you're really reaching deep. But
I
I understand it. No, I understand it. We are where we are, so we still have a benefit from even where we are. I get that. I think that's for, we was talking about the tax issue before, but think about what just happened January the 1st. It went into effect. Yeah. Unemployment insurance for 12 weeks was cut down from 26 weeks. Now think about that. We just start talking about all the negatives that are taking place out here in terms of tornadoes and pandemic stuff and all this sort of stuff. Now they're going to cut this back. And my observation is that this is detrimental in rural areas where we tend to see higher rates of unemployment, and any place where you see it. And it increases the disparity, or reemphasizes the disparity for people of color because of the unemployment rate being greater in those communities as well. I think this is pretty much mindless in my view.
Gerald, you're absolutely correct. I strongly opposed that legislation last year.
I remember.
I just don't understand why we as lawmakers want to enact laws that continue to impoverish our people. As opposed to someone who loses their job. Now, who've lost their job, not people who don't want to work, people who've lost their job who want to work. And now we're going to say after 12 weeks, that's it. And if you get a job offer, a job that pays you 50% less than what you were making, you've got to take it. Otherwise, you're going to go off of unemployment entirely. It makes no sense for us to want to force our people to go back to work for less pay rather than give them the time to find a job at what they were making. We ought to be pushing policies that want to enrich Kentuckians, not make us poor.
Reggie, you home run that is good. Very seldom, you've seen me guys, sometimes I can be passionate, but I don't get real emotional over a lot of issues. This one hit home. I remember being the kid at home when Dad got laid off. I remember how it affected us. I remember losing our home. And so heck, I'm glad that by the grace of God that we went through that. So I have a level of empathy and understanding. But you hit it, Reggie. This isn't an attack on lazy people who haven't worked. These are people who have been working, who lost their job by no fault of their own. That's what it is. And we knew that that was such an important infrastructure to put into place, not necessarily just for the individual, but to protect the social economy of our state, because you got to make sure they don't lose everything, that the things are put back in practice. But this is an opportunity when you do lose a job that people can level up in wages. That's what we need. We need a ready workforce. If you force people back into a lower paying job, all that does is bring down wages, draw that down. We don't need a more entry level jobs. We know that, right? We don't need that. What we need to do is make sure that we're lifting Kentuckians up so that we have those higher wages. We did the opposite. This bill wasn't all bad. Everything in that bill, there were some positive things in there. But boy, when they slashed the time period, when they attacked workers, that's when I got mad. So, like I said, I was looking at it. I was part of that work group. I went through. We were looking at some good things they could do, but they just couldn't help but do the attack on workers. And so, no, we're going to see it. It's going to affect. And it makes me so damn mad when they'll sit there and they'll highlight, because there's some lazy people. And throughout history, there'll always be the greedy with the needy. But the majority of Kentuckians who have been working who lost their job for no fault of their own, are trying to find a way to get back into it. And when somebody says there's so many jobs out there, well, I'm going to point to my wife, Lindsay, who has a master's degree as her PMP, was at Humana working, and she was laid off. And so she's looking for other positions. Well, those type of jobs, you don't get hired off in 12. You go through a process of you go through a period. The hiring process is several months. So how many families did we have the primary breadwinner have to be forced into a reduction of income? And then with that, if you have a 20% reduction in income, how many people have that much additional discretionary income from day? Do you lose your job? Do you sell your cars? What do you do? It was a negative thing that we put into place. We knew that was going to happen. Yet again, we took a shot at Kentuckians, and it's upsetting.
Joe, let me build on David's excellent point in this respect. You went back to January 1st. January 1st, 23 states now have a minimum wage that exceeds the nation's minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Kentucky, regrettably, is not in that category. I have consistently and just again this week filed a bill to increase the minimum wage here in Kentucky up to eventually $15 an hour. If we want to incentivize people to go to work, and we should, we need to increase our workforce. Let's pay them more. Okay, that's how you get people to come back to work. Let's pay them more. It's time that Kentucky join the rest of the states and say we want to increase the minimum wage because we want to increase our workforce.
Well, let me say there is one thing that happened this week that I thought demonstrates what we can do when we work together. And David and I traveled up to Northern Kentucky, and somebody might want to ask, wait a minute, your district's down here in Louisville. Why are you going up to Northern Kentucky? Well, a very extraordinary thing happened in Northern Kentucky, because due to something the opposite of partisanship, which we refer to as bipartisanship, in other words, individuals from both sides coming together and doing something and setting partisanship aside, produced $1.6 million to fund an additional bill, a bridge in Northern Kentucky, the Brent Spence Bridge, which, as a practical matter, and here's where it has something to do with us, it opens up the economy not only of Kentucky and parts of Kentucky, but the North, the South, and so forth. It was bottleneck right there in Cincinnati, and it's going to open that particular piece up, which has a benefit for us as well. And here's the other thing. Besides that, and I'm going to lay back and let you all talk about this a little bit. But by doing that, we've also demonstrated in Kentucky what we can do when we work together, as opposed to working from politicizing everything. I mean, we know there's got to be politics. We know politics is real. We know we have differing opinions. We know we have to have a method of addressing those and so forth. But, looking for what separates us as opposed to looking for what binds us and builds us and uplifts us is, we got to get a hold of that. David, I'm gonna go with you first, since you drove me up there, and I want to thank you for that. I really enjoyed that.
I enjoyed too, and Gerald, a lot of people don't know that. Well, I mean, a lot of people do know, but some don't know that you were the longest serving member of the Senate. And so to talk about that institutional knowledge, we go up there and how that affects Louisville and how long, for decades, they've been talking about this bridge. I think, to me, it was not only a history lesson, but it also shows that we've had problems that are just now being addressed. You also talked about the bipartisanship. We want to point out most of what we do in our Senate that we're working together on. Most of it, we have shared goals and ideas. And so going up there with leadership, there's a lot of friendships. We get along. We're going to be angry and fight hard for when our constituents aren't treated fairly and we're not getting along with something. But the vast majority, we're getting along. At the federal level, you don't always see that. But you're right. It was amazing to be part of something. It started off in our transportation cabinet, in the state legislature, and then in our governor. We had to come up with $250 million. We got back 1.65 billion with a B. That's the largest investment of federal money that's ever happened in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And that is done because our governor and Ohio's governor and the United States Senator Mitch McConnell and members of our House of Representatives, including Congressman Yarmouth, and as well as our United States President Joe Biden, worked in a bipartisan fashion. It's got it done. Remember, it was straight partisan, nothing was happening. But we saw this work together. And the cool thing was, behind the scenes, to see that friendship. A lot of times people play the political games and almost treat people like political pawns. But to see that the two individuals between President Biden and Mitch McConnell still that mutual respect with each other to get this done, to help people, to me, I think it's symbolic. Not only we're going to build this bridge, but we got to build those relationships. And I think the American people want to see it. What's happening in the House of Representatives is embarrassing right now. The rest of the world.
I'm getting ready to go there.
Yeah. But with that being said, we're doing some positive things here at home. And I take it off to Governor Beshear. I mean, the humility to be reaching out to each person, to working in all the way down to, we're state senators, but to say how important this is with the Secretary of Transportation, Jim Gray, all his work on this thing, this was up and down, bottom up, top to bottom, and something makes me really proud to be in the position we are in our constituency, in Louisville, Kentucky, and in Lexington, and throughout the whole country is going to benefit tremendously from this.
Well, I got to say, our friend, the mayor of Covington, Kentucky, Joe Meyer, was elated and was very gracious. And I'm glad to see, because great things are happening in Covington under his leadership and his team of people. But Reggie, look, you've been in the Senate quite a bit. You're a bipartisan kind of guy. You're the kind of guy that reach across the aisle. We all do it, but you're very aggressive in doing that. You've been doing it for a while. What's your views on that?
Well, Joe, I'm glad you asked that question, because I want to go back that David alluded to, and say, first of all, that your transition to being the leader of the Senate Democrats has been received very well across the state. And I've heard from so many different people in Lexington and in other rural areas here in Kentucky, because I know Democrats all over this state, that they are so pleased because of your experience and because of your knowledge and the number of years that you've been in the Senate. As David mentioned earlier, you are the longest serving state senator. That what you brought, in terms of being able to work cooperatively with Republicans and your commitment to the people of Kentucky of all levels and demographics. Everyone's just so pleased that you're our leader, and I just this week I've never seen us as close as Senate Democrats with you leading the way. So I think that needs to be said before you get off this. I didn't want the hour to pass.
You're very
but
kind.
I'm
I
following up
appreciate
on
that.
what David is saying.
What about bipartisanship and the great work you've been doing? Go on, talk about it.
I don't. I'm like you, Gerald. We have to work together. We have to work together, and I'm going to continue to push for us to work together. And I hope we do get some things accomplished. Look, David is right. I would be in favor of going forward with this tax cut if they said, okay, we're going to offset that by trying to raise revenue. Let's authorize medical marijuana. Let's authorize sports gaming. I mean, if they want to go in that direction, I would say, okay, then I'm in favor of the tax cut because we're not losing any revenue in that respect. You know, we're still able to move Kentucky forward. But just to keep cutting and not offset that with revenue, I agree wholeheartedly with everything David has said this hour. That all that does is keep us down, you know, keep a foot on our neck, and not let this state prosper in the way it should prosper.
So let me now get into reality some sort of way, because it's something right that's hitting us right now, because she did an extraordinary thing, in my view, on the floor yesterday when you were talking about this very tragic situation we've had in our juvenile justice system. I can't tell you, and I said this on the floor, how important your comments were, because you put things into perspective, the realities of it. You did a great job doing that. And I want to point out that, you know, our the senator from Green, who brought some legislation to study this and so forth, you know, sometimes we have a tendency to think in, you know, ahead of our investigation, as opposed to getting to the investigation to get a, you know, to cure something, as opposed to placing blame. It just doesn't do it. But I think he's big enough, and I think his intentions are well enough, that by his putting that bill in and you're putting it in context and pushing the spirit of bipartisanship in that particular discussion, saying focus on the issues as opposed to, you know, whether it's the governor, whether it's the legislature. Look, things are fluid. We're challenged all the time. We can fix something one day and have to fix it again next week or next year or whatever. The question is, what we're going to do about getting it fixed. I want to thank you for that, but I also want to get your insights on that. We got this problem, and David, I want you to chime in as well. We got this problem in our juvenile justice system. As I indicated on the floor, I've worked in juvenile facilities. I've been a juvenile probation officer. As lawyers, I think we've all dealt with the juvenile system in some way. What do you think about this situation, and what do you think we should do?
Okay.
Just I know this is very preliminarily.
Okay.
Because we have to investigate it. But what's on your mind?
Well, let me be brief, because I want to give David time to chime in.
Yeah.
I think there are two things that we have to recognize as we address this problem. One, Gerald, our juvenile detention population is significantly different than what it was 10 years ago. What we're seeing now is more juveniles being detained for major crimes, murder, robbery, rape. And we're seeing more juveniles who are part of a collective, a criminal collective. And by that, I mean gang activity. So we're dealing today with some very serious juvenile offenders. That's one problem we've got to recognize. The second question to address is, how are we going to house them? Gerald, the reality is, you know, we can't, if we want to say we want to separate the boys from the girls, Gerald, we can't afford to build, you know, several different facilities, one for boys, one for girls, and spend millions of dollars housing maybe 10 girls in a facility in one location. We can't afford to do that. Now we can afford to build facilities and have them in separate wings, certainly possible. And then there's a cost factor. if we want to separate boys from girls, then we're going to have in some cases, girls being transported 2.5 to 3 hours to a facility, and the same for boys, which imposes significant costs on counties. So there are those factors that have to be worked out and resolved. There's no easy fix to this. But those are some of the critical issues in addressing this problem of juvenile detention.
Hey.
Well, I think it gets, and first of all, Reggie, you're right on point. And thank you for your history the other day too, because without that, I came in blind. For you to be able to explain what had happened, a decade ago and leading up to this, I think is very valuable, because we get to learn from our past. We got to keep on building on that. And same thing with you, Mr. Leader, is that you let them know that this isn't something we're going to solve, because in 2 years, you're going to go back and say, well, you guys didn't do this. You can only play with the information that you have. With that being said, is we got to get the information, we got to study. But one thing that we know, that regardless of how we deal with the immediate problem at hand, which we have to do, the larger problem is that these juveniles are committing more heinous, worse crimes. There's more of them. It's more often. And they told Kentucky this would happen. We're number 1 or number 2 in abuse and neglect of children year after year. We fall behind. One of the things about pre-K is not only getting people back to work so that young mothers can get back to work and things like that, but also remove some of the children who are in horrific homes to be able to have some type of wraparound services early on. There's all these positive things. We know that reading readiness reduces the amount of incarceration. Yet we do not invest the way that we should. It costs so much more to house the juvenile offender and then the long-term, the criminal, than it ever would is to invest in the young person. And so I think that part of this study, I hope we extend that, because we want to make sure we stop it before it happens. And the second part is, we don't want to just house these kids. You better make sure you got a short opportunity where you've taken them away from, and we know that's one of the big issues. I was a youth mentor. A lot of times you want to make sure people are connected to services, but a lot of times you have to remove them from some of the negative influences that have been in their life. And sometimes it's even family members. But we have a short period of time that we have that child. Let's wrap around with services. Let's get them into a position where they get the tutoring, whatever they've fallen behind. They got a short period and we catch them up, so that their incarceration in the juvenile justice system, that while some, you're right, it may be so far and so the issue be that we may not be able to do and make changes in that short period, there's a lot of children that we can really have a dramatic impact. And the reason I know, Gerald, Reggie, the reason I know this is true is I was a member of ROTC Bluegrass Challenge. I was a youth mentor. These kids had committed felonies, they committed crimes, whatnot. And our success rate was phenomenal. It was expensive. They cut the program. But I promise you, it was a hell of a lot less expensive to wrap around those kids in that program than it would to be able to house them and later on be them in the criminal justice system the rest of their life. So to me, it is something I'm passionate about. I think it's something we can have a very real impact immediately, but also long-term.
Well, let me tell you, both of you, I think, are right, focused on that issue correctly. But this is, as you know, is a very complex issue.
Yes.
It's complex. It's an evolving issue. The times I was dealing with that are not the times that we're facing right now. But we do some things because we're not willing to invest. This is going to take money. I don't care what you say. It's going to take a lot of services and all that. But when you say services, you're talking about money.
Big money.
When you're talking about physical plants, you're talking about money. Just think about it. We closed the facility in Jefferson County where they had the ability and had programs where the school system was continuing educating these kids, where these kids now are being shipped all the way across Kentucky with no support services or adequate services, as David is describing. What's going on? And you can't really blame, you can pick out a bad actor. You can pick out a bad system. You can pick out a bad administrator. But at the end of the day, you got to invest. You got to invest, you got to revisit. And we have not, from my observation, done that adequately. So there's no sense in pointing the fingers at everybody in the world. What we got to do is figure out what's going on, make proper investment, a common sense investment. And I don't think you can get around from services. These are kids. They need support. They are where they are because of the lack of support. Something bigger than them is happening, and they are reacting to that reality. So generally, we just call it poverty, or we can call it abuse, etc. So we got to be smart about this, but we can't do this by just pointing a finger at somebody and saying, "Here's the reason why we have the problem." No, this is bigger than a somebody. I would say. Okay, you got me a little passionate there too, because this is something that gets me rolling a little bit too.
We like to see you when you're passionate, Gerald. We like the passionate Gerald Neal.
I try to be cool. Come on.
It'll keep segueing into another issue, and one that we've all supported is mental health services, and we know that's an issue that we fall behind, and it's direct related. See, it's never in a vacuum, right? It's all interrelated. These are major,
That's right,
issues that cost a lot of money, but it costs so much more for failure to address it. If you got a leaky roof and you don't patch that roof, it's going to cost you a heck of a lot more 5 years down the road. Right now, we got all kinds of leaks in our roof. We got to get some patching done.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this. I'm going to resist at every turn somebody pointing a finger at some administrator somewhere, or a governor, or look, we have what we have. Now the question is, what are we going to do about it? We need to study it, and we should use a very calm approach to this. We should think of what objectives are related to the children in particular and the communities that are impacted, and we will resolve it. Then we're going to have to set up a system to revisit it, obviously, periodically. Maybe it's a 5-year deal or something like that, but we have to revisit it.
Absolutely. You're correct.
Okay, so I'm going to let you all pick. I'm sorry, David.
I was just going to say, and if we don't, it's not fair to everyone who our citizens live here, because we have a crime problem. And part of that crime problem is our failure to address the issues early on.
Yeah. Now, here, I'm going to back up a minute, and we have about 5 minutes left. And I'm going to let you all run this show. So you all just pick out whatever you want to talk about and just roll with it.
Well, I'll go first, Joe. And this is something we haven't talked about in this hour, but I'm going to close with this. We need to pass universal pre-K here in Kentucky. If we're going to open up the budget this session, then that needs to be number one. Because, Joe, the way we build a bright future in this state and the way we really advance Kentucky going forward is by investing in our children and investing in education. And every study that's done in education says that if you have universal pre-K, you get 4-year-olds in there early, then their chances of having better health outcomes, having better quality of life, making more money, having less mental health issues, all of that occurs when you have 4-year-olds going to school, and that ought to be done universally, regardless of any income limits here in Kentucky. So I'm going to close with that. We need to pass universal pre-K. That's my closing argument.
David.
Gerald, that's why we're one tough
Give us a magic bullet here.
That's why we're one tough unit, because that's what it is. We're together on that. And by passing that pre-K, universal pre-K, we address so many of the woes that we already have. And we know the abuse and neglect. It makes me sick to my stomach when we're representing the Commonwealth of Kentucky and they talk about we're number 1 or number 2 in abuse and neglect of our children. So let's invest in our children. We know that offsets it. It prepares the kids. It reduces the crime. It helps the reading readiness. It's just a win-win. The amount of money that we would invest into it, we get back. It's a multiplier effect. So absolutely, if we don't do anything else but do that, I'd hold my head up high. But again, we've got to keep on fighting and pushing for the marijuana issues, the medical marijuana. It's the right thing. We need to keep that conversation going. We need to push it. We know that it'll likely be killed in leadership, but that doesn't mean we need to make sure we're letting the people's voices be heard. And the sports gaming, I can't explain why I hadn't. Either can Reggie and Mr. Leader, I know that you can't either, because it doesn't make sense. So we've got to keep pushing for it.
Well, I'm going to make a comment. I think the bottom line is that we have to raise is a very high aspiration, but a reality that we must work together and that we must listen more carefully to one another. And we should reach out to those who disagree with us and implore them to engage in the same discussion so that we can reach some common resolution of problems and issues. No matter how passionate we are about them, I think at the end of the day, we're just a blip on that whole avenue of the continuum. And sometimes we have a tendency to make ourselves so important in the moment that we lose track of where we are in the whole breadth of things. So I think we need to calm down, lower our voices, talk sincerely, move with integrity. And that's the kind of message I'm going to be sending. But I'm not going to compromise on things that undermine people, things that don't uplift, things that suppress, uh, things that are unfair. I think that's the line. And I think we got to still keep engagement in that process. I want to thank my guests. I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank my friends for being on here today. I can't tell you how excited I am working with you guys. And just this week confirmed every single thing that I was hoping for, and alleviated every doubt I had when I accept the responsibility as leader in this regard. Listen, I think we're on the same page, and I think that we're going to be doing great things going forward. And God bless you all. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Straight Talk. You've heard it, and you know that what I always say when we close off a show is do the right thing. God bless our guests, and God bless you as well. Bye-bye.